I don't ever remember walking as a young person. I always ran. It was just my nature to run.
He was extraordinarily talented.
That's what he did.
Back to pass goes Damon, throws deep down the middle.
Subsequent generations didn't know that Marty had been an athlete, and a terrific one.
For any of us, he had the great Marty Glickman.
You can't say 36 Olympics without thinking of Adolf Hitler and what the U.S. did to Marty Glickman.
The first jock turned broadcaster in the history of our media.
The crowd all rising, pounding on the seat.
He invented the vernacular.
It's a key.
The lane.
Swish. Swish. Swish.
Marty embedded the game into the consciousness of America.
Good, like Nedix.
I would talk like him, walk like him.
What Marty did for these kids in these programs was unprecedented.
Remember the man, Wilt Chamberlain. Into the lower side, Overshick on the outside now has taken the lead. Why doesn't he go? Moving downfield and killing the clock. That's what the Giants have to do. The handoff goes to Coy, double reverse, a triple reverse. It goes to Targeted finally. Targeted throws to Morrison. Morrison has got the ball. It's down to 10. The 5. Touchdown! Touchdown! A triple reverse and a pass by Targeted. Wow! That's the kind of a play you make up on the streets or in the playground or your backyard. The kids make them up. A triple reverse. Wow.
He changed the landscape of sports and television as we know it today.
In Greek mythology, Hermes was not only the god of speed, but the god of eloquence, as he became the messenger of all the Olympian gods. Few people have ever embodied both these qualities more than Martin Irving Glickman.
I was always the fastest kid on the block. And because of that, I had an advantage in any sport I played. So I played punch ball and box ball and ringalivio, the games kids played in the Bronx and Brooklyn in those days.
Marty inherited his speed from his father. When Harry Glickman was a boy in Romania, he won his school's 100-meter dash. Though he won the race, they gave the medal to the second-place finisher, the mayor's son. They gave Harry, the Jewish kid, 2 pennies.
My father wouldn't speak Romanian at home. He only spoke English because he wanted to be an American. He was in the cotton goods business, first as a salesman, and then he owned his own company. However, at the time of the Great Depression, he went broke like so many others did, and they had a very tough time after that. He began to bet in the latter years of the Depression. Lost his business, lost his fortune, and almost ruined his life and family through gambling. It became so bad that on one occasion, he asked me to go to the bank with him. I had all of $35 in my personal bank account for my bar mitzvah. He wanted to borrow the $35. And I was eager to please him, even though he was in a desperate way. My mother was so furious that the family almost broke up as a result.
Surviving Depression-era Brooklyn, 2 things would come to define young Marty.
I was always aware of the fact that I'm a Jew. Never unaware of it under virtually all circumstances.
The other was athletics, as Marty's joy and passion for sports began to transform his life.
Sports were critical to me. My life was built around sports, and I think it began when I started reading the Merriwell books. And Frank Merriwell was the premier hero. He became an All-American football player, basketball player, a champion in all the sports he participated in. I wanted to be Frank Merriwell, this fictional character.
Attending James Madison High School, the 5'8" Flatbush Flash went on to become the city, state, and national sprint champion, running the 100-yard dash in 9.5 seconds. just 1/10 of a second off Jesse Owens' world record.
Sports made him a star, sports made him a celebrity, and obviously that's amateur. We're talking about high school sports.
You hear the stories and people just rave. People who normally don't use superlatives are using them when describing him as an athlete.
I was on a sports department of the Jamaica High School newspaper, and they were scrimmaging James Madison from Brooklyn, and all of a sudden I see this kid go flying down the sideline like a rocket, and I yelled out, "Whoa, who was that?" And somebody up the line said, "Oh, that's Marty Glickman. He's a runner." He was a bolt of lightning.
He was the Red Grange of Brooklyn.
In one of the biggest high school football games in New York City history, 20,000 fans packed Ebbets Field to see Marty Glickman and his underdog Madison teammates face off against the great Sid Luckman and his defending city champs, Erasmus High. Luckman would go on to become an NFL Hall of Fame quarterback, but on this day he was no match for Glickman, as Marty led Madison to a crushing 25-0 upset of Erasmus. Marty would go on to lead Madison to an undefeated season, quarterbacking the team to the city and state championship, while being named the New York City High School football MVP.
It was such an anomaly for a Jewish kid to have been, so they became almost like superheroes, like we have today, the comic book heroes. I mean, they were bigger than life. Marty Glickman was bigger than life in the eyes of people. We were so proud.
There is a sensual thrill in being able to run swiftly and easily and edging ahead of the rest of the field. On occasion, I used to feel that.
In the fall of 1935, Marty Glickman left Brooklyn to attend Syracuse University. He chose Syracuse because 5 Jewish alumni paid for his education freshman year. But Marty was no spoiled college athlete, as he worked in the school cafeteria for his meals and took another job cleaning the gymnasium pool. Since he was not on scholarship and could not afford to stay in the dorms, he slept in the gym at night with 5 other football players.
It is the running track above the gymnasium floor, a cozy spot for a cot.
Marty went on to star for the freshman football team, as well as becoming the fastest sprinter on the school's track squad. Any thoughts of Olympic glory were still months away.
I didn't think in terms of the Olympic Games until I was well into my freshman year at Syracuse University. I was still a kid. I was 17. Only in my freshman year, when I began to win against important competition, and when I won the Metropolitan Championships in New York City, and then the Eastern Olympic Trials up at Harvard against a great sprinter named Ben Johnson, when I beat Ben, the world's record holder at 60 yards, I realized then that I had a chance to make the Olympic team.
New York's brand new $1 million stadium to see America's cavalcade of track stars in the Olympic finals.
The U.S. Olympic track trials at Randall's Island would result in one of the most competitive and politically significant teams in America's history. The marquee event of the trials was the 100-meter finals. The top 3 finishers would represent the U.S. in the race at the Berlin Games. In lane 1 was Mac Robinson, Jackie Robinson's older brother. In lanes 2 and 3 were Foy Draper and Frank Wyckoff, the 2 USC Trojans. Occupying lane 4 was Jesse Owens, the fastest man in the world. Local fan favorite Marty Glickman, at 18, the youngest runner in the field by 2 years, was in lane 5. Beside him in lane 6 was Ralph Metcalf, the second fastest man in the world. Michigan star Sam Stoller, the other Jewish runner in the competition, was in lane 7.
Jesse Owens and Ralph Metcalf. These 2 magnificent athletes on either side of me, and I'm scared stiff. My foot was shaking so I could not put my foot in that starting hole. It was just vibrating so I couldn't put it down. I don't remember the gun going off. And then I was running. Suddenly, as though they were on an escalator and I was not, they were pulling ahead. And I was fighting like a son of a bitch. And out of the side of my eye, I could see Foy Draper. I could feel these guys. And I had him. And Wyckoff was ahead of me, but I had a very strong finish. And I thought I caught him. And I thought I finished third in the race. So much so that Ted Using, who was the leading track and field broadcaster at the time, Ted called me over after the race and said, "Here's Marty Glickman, the kid from Brooklyn who finished third." "Oh, wait a second," he said. "I see they've placed Frank Wyckoff third. Marty finished fourth." And he interviews Frank, and then he says, "Now here's Marty." "Oh, just a moment," he says. "They've placed Floyd Draper in the fourth place. Marty finished fifth." I noted that Dean Cromwell, the assistant head track coach of the American Olympic team, was in amongst the officials.
You've been track coach at the USC for 30 years, haven't you?
40 years, Groucho.
Well, my watch has stopped.
Within moments, Dean Cromwell, who had just coached USC to its 5th national championship, cornered several of the officials. His Trojans, he told them, had been robbed. He insisted Glickman had finished 5th. Cromwell convinced the officials to change the order.
I was a bit upset about that. Films from the race indicate that I beat Floyd Draper by a foot. Very little question about that. As for Frank and myself, you could choose the winner between the two of us, but I didn't know whether I beat Frank or not, nor did he. I had made the team anyhow, because the first 7 men were to make the team, the first 3 finishers running the 100-meter run, and the next 4 finishers making up the 400-meter relay. So I had made the team.
I thought, gee, they made the Olympic team. Someday the kids are going to say, "Well, Daddy, what did you do in the Olympics?" Nothing.
Up goes the official flag on the liner Manhattan, carrying 334 athletes. Sampling the deck track, America's triple champion, Jesse Owens.
I'm going to try to bring back 3 crowns, that is, in the 100 meters, 200 meters, and the broad jump.
I was this 18-year-old kid from Brooklyn, and here I was aboard this magnificent liner heading for Europe. It was just wonderful.
But this was a trip that Marty and his Olympic teammates almost didn't make. In 1935, Nazi Germany passed the Nuremberg Laws, stripping Jews of their citizenship and barring them from competing in German sports clubs, a serious violation of Olympic rules. This caused the Amateur Athletic Union, whose approval was necessary to send a U.S. team to Berlin, to advocate a boycott of the Games.
I was aware that there were some people in America who didn't want us to go to Germany because of anti-Semitism. But I wanted to show that a Jew could do just as well as any other individual, perhaps even better.
Avery Brundage, the president of the U.S. Olympic Committee, was also against the boycott, but for vastly different reasons.
His great ambition was to meet Hitler, or Hitler was kind of a hero song or something.
Brundage would publicly denounce the boycott movement as a Jewish communist conspiracy to keep the U.S. out of the Games.
The Nazis couldn't conceive of 36 Olympics where an American team doesn't come. There was Germany saying to Avery Brundage, "Avery, it all depends on you." He came back and said, "What are you talking about? The Jews are allowed to compete for the German team. You've been misled."
When Brundage announces that the Nazis have put Jewish track star Gretel Bergmann on its Olympic team, the AAU votes down the boycott.
We're off to Berlin with the largest and finest team that we have ever sent abroad.
The day after the U.S. set sail for Germany, the Nazis dropped Gretel Bergmann from their Olympic team.
Germany has one of those made-to-order welcomes ready for America's 382 athletes. Tens of thousands give the Yankees an overwhelming reception, while buses carry them to the Olympic Village.
Marty arrived in a Berlin that had been sanitized for its Olympic guests. All the anti-Semitic signs and posters had been removed from the city by the order of Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi minister of propaganda.
Banners and flags, they were all over the place and dominated by the swastika. This was 36, before we really got to know what the swastika truly meant.
Curtain goes up on the 1936 Olympics. The huge stadium is packed for the opening parade. 5,000 athletes from 50 countries were in the march past as Germany's 2 years of preparation turns the 11th Sport Festival into a spectacular national holiday.
I'll never forget walking into the stadium, marching in along with my American teammates in the opening day parade. There was Hitler on the podium with his entourage of Goering and Goebbels and Hess and Himmler and all those people. And we kind of looking up at him, and he looking down at us very sternly. And you could hear the comment run through our ranks as we walked in together. He looks just like Charlie Chaplin. He was comic to us. We know how much power he ultimately would have.
Adolf Hitler was a genius. What he needed was international respectability. And what greater way to gain international respectability than to have all the nations of the world visit him, pay homage to him. Hitler could turn after that to the German people and say, you see what the world thinks of me? They honor me. Follow me.
For Adolf Hitler, the games would also demonstrate to the world the superiority of the master race. At least that was the plan.
Jesse, along with the other great black athletes, was just smashing in a smithereens this myth of Nazi Aryan supremacy.
If Hitler was humiliated by the black athletes, the thought of Jews standing on the winning podium troubled him even more, since it could strike a profound blow to his claims of Jewish inferiority. The next scheduled race was a 400-meter relay, Marty Glickman and Sam Stoller's event, an event the Americans were so favored to win, it was said the only way they would lose was if they dropped the baton.
The morning of the day we were supposed to run in the trial heats, we were called into a meeting, the 7 sprinters were, along with Dean Cromwell, the assistant head track coach, and Lawson Robertson, the head track coach. And Robertson announced to the 7 of us that he'd heard very strong rumors that the Germans were saving their best sprinters, hiding them, to upset the American team in the 400-meter relay. And consequently, Sam and I were to be replaced by Jesse Owens and Ralph Metcalf. We were shocked. Coach, you know, we're the only 2 Jews on the track team, Sam and I. We'll worry about that later, said Dean Cromwell. Sam was completely stunned. He didn't say a word in the meeting. I'm a brash 18-year-old kid, and I said, Coach, no matter who runs, we're going to win this race by 15 yards. At which point, Jesse spoke up and said, I've won my 3 gold medals. I'm tired. I've had it. Let Marty and Sam run. They deserve it. And Cromwell pointed his finger at him and said, you'll do as you're told. And in those days, black athletes did as they were told.
10 a.m. BULOVA Boulevard Watch Time, WABC, New York.
And now I see that they're blowing the whistle for the start of the 400-meter relay. Jesse Owens will start it off for the United States. They're on their marks. They're set. They go.
Watching the final, all sorts of emotions flashed through my being.
Metcalf is starting to move out in front now on the backstretch.
I see Metcalf passing runners down the backstretch. That should be me out there. That should be me. That's me out there.
Pass it on now to Floyd Draper of Southern California. Draper moves out in front by about 7 yards, and he's going to pass it on next to Frankie Wyckoff. Wyckoff takes a beautiful start on that. He's down the stretch 15 yards out in front and running in the 3rd lane.
When you see the finish of the race, all you see is Frank Wyckoff crossing the finish line. You don't even see the 2nd place finisher. He's out of the picture, 15 yards behind.
If they had Stoller and Glickman in there, they might have, instead of winning by 15 yards, they might have won by 14 yards.
The Germans didn't finish 2nd or 3rd, they finished 4th. So the story given us was an out-and-out lie by Robertson and by Dean Cromwell.
The day after the race, Marty was walking across the Olympic Village when Lawson Robertson, the team's head track coach, spotted him.
Marty, Marty. And I jogged over to him. I just want to tell you how sorry I am. I made a terrible mistake. And he said he was sorry. Dean Cromwell didn't say a word. Never spoke to me again.
Some people believe that Dean Cromwell was only looking after his USC Trojans, Draper and Wyckoff, and that track politics was the reason Glickman and Stoller were dropped. Frank Wyckoff disagreed with that assessment. Down in my heart, I think it was done the way it was because of the Jewish thing. I'm sorry, but I believe that. Ralph Metcalf added, "Of course I'm convinced it was the Jewish thing that was behind it. Glickman and Stoller should have run." Others blame Avery Brundage, believing he removed the two Jewish runners to appease Hitler. Brundage dismissed any accusations of foul play, writing in his official report on the 1936 games. An erroneous report was circulated that two athletes had been dropped from the American relay team because of their religion. This report was absurd. The two athletes were taken only as substitutes. 2 years later, when the Nazis were building the German embassy in Washington, D.C., they awarded the construction contract to Avery Brundage.
In the entire history of the modern Olympic Games, no fit American track and field performer has ever not competed in the Olympic Games, except for Sam Stoller and me, the only two Jews on the 1936 team. I was not devastated by not being on the 400-meter team. Terribly angry, terribly frustrated. But at the age of 18, the world is bright and glorious in front of you. A month from the Olympic Games, I was going to be playing football at Syracuse University, my first varsity season then, and I had something to look forward to. Football, in the days I played, was much more fun, I am sure, than it is today. For one thing, we played both ways. You made tackles, and you blocked, and you carried the ball, and you passed or caught. You did all the things a football player was supposed to do.
If you look at the history of Syracuse running backs, it's a great history. You have Lloyd Little, three-time All-American, Jim Nance, Ernie Davis, myself. Before any of us, you had the great Marty Glickman.
I had a good day against Cornell. We upset them 14-6. At that time, they were national power. I scored both touchdowns. I ran a punt back for one, pucked over for another. Made a couple of touchdown-saving tackles. Intercepted a couple of passes. Easily the best day I ever had. And the following day, there was a great deal of publicity about this in upstate New York.
Those grand boys who trimmed Cornell, and the experts said it couldn't be done.
I received a phone call from a local haberdasher. He says, "Frankly, Marty, I want to cash in on your publicity. I want you to do a sports radio broadcast for me." I said, "You don't want me. I'm nervous. I stutter. I stammer. I've never been on the air." He said, "I'll pay you $15 a broadcast." I said, "I'll take it." That's how I got started broadcasting.
I go on the air at 9:15 that night. My first words on the air are, "Good afternoon, everybody."
I think swiftly, see that same fade back. Goes one to Allen. And Cornell is toppled from the football height, 19-17.
Something took place in 1937, which was a direct result of what happened to me in 1936. I was playing football at Syracuse. We had upset Cornell the week before, going to a game against Maryland, in Baltimore. And as we're getting dressed for the game, sitting alongside of me is the other starting halfback. His name is Wilmot Siddhat Singh. He is a black man, but his mother had married a Hindu physician. Will and I played side by side. We took classes together. He helped me through my physics class. Later, He was a member of the Black Airmen who helped form the one squadron of Black Aviators in World War II. But this was in 1937 in Baltimore, Maryland. We're getting dressed for the game. He's sitting right alongside of me, right here. He slept alongside of me where we slept in the gym. And the coach came in, Ossie Solom, and he said, fellas, I've got some news. The local press and Maryland has just found out that Will is not a Hindu, but he's a black man. And consequently, he won't play today. And I said to myself, sitting there, stand up, Marty, and say, if Will doesn't play, I don't play. And I'm one of the leaders of the team this week anyhow. And I say, stand up and say that. And I think to myself, but if I do stand up and say that, and the game is canceled, and this ruckus or this furor develops as a result of the game being canceled, if that happens, they'll point to me, and there's that Jewish guy getting in trouble again. Because just the year before, I'd been involved in the anti-Semitic incident in Berlin. And so I didn't say a word. And Will didn't play. And to this day, that's the one thing in my life I'm sorry for. All the other things I've done or I haven't done, I'm terribly important. This hurts me. Because I could have done something about it, and I didn't. A couple of years after that, Will was killed in World War II. And to this day, I still feel very strongly that I should have gotten up and said. And he was good enough to die for our country, but he wasn't good enough to play against Maryland.
If he hadn't been dissed by the Olympic Committee, he might not have gone on to become the great sports announcer that he became.
Marty Glickman graduated Syracuse in 1939 and returned to New York City, determined to find his place in broadcasting. Though work was scarce, he landed a job running errands for WHN Radio. Within a year, they would offer the industrious 21-year-old his own late-night 15-minute show.
Hiya, fans. I'm Marty Glickman.
Marty's radio show did more than start his career. The steady salary allowed him to propose to his high school sweetheart, Marge Dorman, who was now a Broadway dancer.
My mom and dad met in high school. He was the captain of the football team, and she was the prettiest girl in school. And of course, my mom's parents said he's not going to amount to anything.
When Marty's radio show was canceled just 2 weeks before they were to be married, he and Marge debated whether to tell her parents, worried they would call off the wedding. Don't tell, won in a landslide. And on Christmas Day, 1940, Mr. Martin Glickman and Miss Marjorie Dorman became man and wife.
And that's the beginning of a long and wonderful story.
After the demise of his show, Marty reacted in typical Glickman fashion. He started working nights at WHN for free, writing scripts. To pay the bills, he worked at Gimbel's during the day and played minor league football on weekends for $50 a game.
He came to our training camp, and he didn't make our team, but he was a farmhand. We had a farm team in Jersey City.
I didn't give professional football more years because I wasn't good enough, and because they were so big and tough. I'm a little guy, football terms certainly, but actually I was invited back for a second year with the Jersey City Giants, and I had been the leading ball carrier for the ball club for the previous year, and in the league. Marge said, look, you've just started a career as a broadcaster. Why don't you stay with it? And I think I wisely chose not to continue playing professional football. Well, plus the fact that I never get belted broadcasting.
Concentrating on his radio career, Marty started making a name for himself, announcing today's baseball, a dramatized recreation of the key games of the day. His recreations were so exciting, fans would deliberately refrain from learning the results of the ball games so they could enjoy Marty's recap that night.
Hot shot of the foot, straight along the left field foul line, bouncing into the right field corner. In the last half of the fourth, Keller DiMaggio Henry down 1-2-3. I did that for 13 years. I truly learned how to broadcast by doing today's baseball.
Though his career was taking off, and he was now the proud father of a baby girl, the country was deep in the throes of World War II. So in 1943, Marty Glickman enlisted in the Marines as a first lieutenant.
I was a Marine in the Central Pacific during World War II in the Marshall Islands. I was a night fighter controller. I used to use the microphone in service, controlling the interception of raiding enemy planes with our own airplanes.
One of the reasons I got that assignment was because I was a sports announcer, and I thought that a sports announcer was able to read and speak rapidly and crisply.
So sports announcer is of some use in this world.
With what respect?
When Marty returned home from the war, he learned about those friends who didn't make it back. The loss of an Olympic teammate led to one of Marty Glickman's most memorable broadcasts.
Lou Zamperini was a member of the 1936 Olympic team. He was a friend of mine, a buddy, and a teammate. And he was lost in the Pacific.
At the Knights of Columbus track meet at Madison Square Garden, Marty broadcast the Lou Zamperini Memorial Mile. I began to cry during the playing of the Star-Spangled Banner. The vision of Zamperini, black-haired, green-eyed, grinning, was with me throughout the race. During a rescue mission, Zamperini's plane crashed into the Pacific, killing 9 of the 12 men aboard.
The plane exploded, ball of flame. Oh, I'm a dead man.
Louis secured a raft, then swam back and pulled the pilot and the tail gunner from the wreckage, saving their lives.
47 days out there in the ocean, 2,000-mile drift. It was brutal.
Their raft washed ashore on a Japanese-occupied island, otherwise known to the Americans as Execution Island.
After being picked up by the Japanese and put into a dungeon for 43 days, that was much worse.
Louis went on to survive a 2-year nightmare in a Japanese prison camp before returning home.
2 people called me when I got back from the war. One was Marty Glickman, and that was a thrill. Marty told me that they had this Memorial Mile.
The following year, I broadcast the second and final Lou Zamperini Memorial Mile, and the starter of that race was Lou Zamperini.
He was still black-haired, green-eyed, and grinning, and I was still crying.
Rattling down the side, 1 point behind, he jump shoots, good from the corner, and I was announcing like Marty.
By the 1940s, sportscasters were making their mark by specializing in particular sports.
Nobody was doing basketball. I determined that I would make my mark as the basketball announcer. Basketball was my first sport. Basketball was my first love. I broadcast my first game still in service in December of '45 during the doubleheaders at the Garden. To my knowledge, that was the first sustained basketball ever done.
Invented the way basketball should be broadcast.
He was the first to go with terminology that had never been heard before.
He invented the vernacular. He invented the style.
I'd finish a game and go to the owners. You might say that till 2 o'clock in the morning talking basketball. I mean, Joe Lapchick, Matt Holman, Henry Iva, Adolph Rupp, greatest coaches in the country. Then I'd go home, and I never slept. I would replay that basketball game all night long. How could I have said this? How should I have said that? And I began to work on the actual proper phraseology that could best describe the plays.
He was very innovative. He coined lots of new phrases.
The key.
The lane, the midcourt stripe,
The elbow, the top of the circle.
And he invented the one best term ever in sports broadcasting, swish.
Swish, swish.
Swish! I broadcast from the front edge of the mezzanine, and in the first row right behind me used to sit a Jewish gentleman. And I knew he was Jewish because when I said swish, he would say swish.
He had Glickman words. With him as a dominant sports broadcaster, it pervaded the whole game and pervaded the whole way people talk about the game.
Marty developed
a way of calling a game that laid out the geography of the court.
Your baseline is at the left-hand corner, is at the right-hand corner.
Was he driving down the lane? Is he driving across? He made that little subtle difference that made the game come to life.
That allowed someone listening on the radio to picture the positioning of the players, that whole theater of the mind thing.
Other broadcasters will talk about Smith passing to Jones. Now it comes to Isaac shoots, that kind of a description. My goal was to have the listener see the game as I saw the game. I just followed the ball.
Knickerbocker's ball, they move it in the forecourt along the right sideline. A bounce pass into the right corner of the tunnel. Burned back along the side to Scheckman for a two-handed side set. It's good!
How he stayed on top of the play was amazing. It was like his voice was attached to the ball.
Vince Barilla has it in the corner, moves out along the sideline, over to Al McGuire at the top of the key. He drives, pulls up, jumps, and he hits.
As I saw it, I said it, and also felt it. And the feeling of it is just as important as the description of it. And you use the right phraseology, nothing fancy. A dribble is a dribble. There's a phrase they use now, he puts it on the floor. Well, for me, putting it on the floor means taking the basketball and putting it on the floor. He dribbles right-handed along the right sideline. Now you see it, right-handed dribble along the right sideline.
Nobody framed a basketball game like Marty Glickman. That is, he gave me the court. He was television on radio. He was unbelievable. I saw the game so that the first time I went to Madison Square Garden, it was familiar to me. He gave me basketball in my brain.
Scandal rocks the sports world.
With Marty broadcasting doubleheaders from the Garden, college basketball was all the rage. It was the hottest ticket in New York from early December until late March. And in 1950, when City College of New York made basketball history, winning both the NIT and the NCAA tournaments in the same year, Marty was there describing every dribble.
Again, Melchori drives in. He misses.
When City College won, New York City was overjoyed because these were the New York City kids against the best in the world. This was our team. These were our kids from our neighborhood. They were us. We were they. It was just wonderful.
They owned the city.
They didn't own it for long. In the biggest sports scandal since the Black Sox through the 1919 World Series, CCNY and 6 other colleges had been fixing games, or as it was referred to at the time, dumping.
They didn't lose the games because they made sure the point spread was such where the gamblers would win.
The district attorney discovered that between 1947 and 1951, 86 games had been fixed in 23 cities and 17 states by 32 players from 7 colleges.
It destroyed us.
It was a shock. It was something you just didn't want to hear. You didn't want to believe.
I couldn't believe it. I said, couldn't be. The football bounced off the rim, bounced off the rim.
I had a buddy. He was an all-American basketball player. He said, Marty, they're dumping. I'm telling you, they're dumping. I said, I don't believe it. He says, Marty, I'm telling you they are. I dumped. I don't believe you. I said, I didn't want to believe you.
Marty was always very upset with himself that he did not realize that there was a dumping going on when he was broadcasting college basketball. But in all fairness, I could understand where you might not pick it up.
You couldn't see a game dumped. I didn't know when they dumped game, and I knew basketball pretty well. Any shot in basketball can be made or missed. How do you know when he does it deliberately? I haven't the faintest idea.
After the scandal, college basketball at Madison Square Garden took a nosedive. Schools dropped athletic programs, and people went to jail. And though all white schools, such as Kentucky and Bradley, were also caught fixing games, it was CCNY, with its New York mix of black and Jewish ball players, which received most of the blame. As for Marty, the man who had made his mark as the basketball announcer, he suffered a major blow to his career. And for the second time in his life, he was forced to cope with the damage caused by gambling.
I can be sympathetic to them, but they did wrong. I was very proud of the fact that I was a Jew. When I went into broadcasting, I was the first Jewish broadcaster known as a Jew because of my name. Mel Allen came in at about the same time I did. Mel was Mel Israel and became Mel Allen, and a great broadcaster and a wonderful guy. But he did change his name. Pro basketball in the early days of the BAA and the NBA was almost like a minor league sport.
With professional basketball struggling to survive, Marty Glickman's broadcast quickly became one of the league's biggest attractions.
There was no one better to do NBA basketball than Marty Glickman.
You knew that if you heard Marty's voice, it was time to stop the dial and to listen.
Rogers missing. Rebound. A rebound by Chamberlain. Tremendous surges up and down the floor. Look at this crowd. 92.
It was fun. It was basic. It was rough. And it was highly competitive. And for me as a broadcaster and as a fan, it was a joy. We were one big happy family. We were all in this thing together, all enjoying it, and all looking to make it work and be successful.
I asked Marty one time how to motivate. You know, we're coming to the playoffs, so I want to know something different, how to motivate a team. So I said, why don't you come in the locker room and do this for me? So he came in the locker room, he looked at the players, looked around, went to the blackboard. He wrote down, you win 10,000, you lose 5,000.
Of course, Marty had the whole package, and that was the era when sponsors weren't above requiring announcers to kind of work their product into the call of the game. So a free throw would be good like Needix. Good like Needix.
Good like Needix.
Good like Needix.
I worked at Needix. It wasn't so good.
Needix! Right, which was the little fast food place in the front of Madison Square Garden.
And when Marty said it was as good as Needix, you had to get a hot dog.
And they were good.
Good like Needix. Dribbles up along the right side. Bounces the pass into the right corner. Back along the sideline again.
Marty's revolutionary broadcasts weren't just hawking hot dogs. They were also inspiring one of the most influential writers of the Beat generation, Jack Kerouac, author of On the Road.
Man, have you dug that mad Marty Glickman announcing basketball games? Up the midcourt, bounce, fake, set shot, swish, 2 points. Absolutely the greatest announcer I ever heard.
Marty actually embedded the game into the consciousness of America.
Marty was the first television broadcaster of the NBA Game of the Week on the Dumont Network. When he learned that Dumont was folding, Marty brokered the first national broadcast deal between NBC's head of sports, Tom Gallery, and NBA Commissioner, Maurice Podoloff.
He wasn't just an announcer, he was a sports fan. And he knew that out there was this wide open market that fans would eat this stuff up. I mean, so far ahead of his time in so many different ways, as an announcer, as an executive.
The following season, Podoloff told Marty that NBC had renewed its contract with the league. That's not all he told him.
He said, Marty, I got some bad news for you. You're not going to be the broadcaster anymore. I said, I'm not. And I was shocked, very surprised at all that.
NBC replaced Marty Glickman with Lindsey Nelson. Several years later, Marty ran into the executive producer of the telecast, Perry Smith. Smith told Marty the following story.
Perry told me Maurice Podoloff and Tom Gallery didn't want 3 Jewish names at the top of the NBA. Maurice Podoloff, Haskell Cohn, and Marty Glickman, the voice of the NBA. And that's the reason you were not selected to continue.
What Marty did at the time was deal with the Jewish situation, because a lot of people don't think of the struggle that the Jews had as far as racism and prejudice.
How do I put this? Have we ever hired any Jews? Not on my watch. That's very funny. It's not what I meant. We've got an Italian,
Salvatore, my art director.
That won't work. Sorry. Most of the Jewish guys work for the Jewish firms.
Yeah, I know. Selling Jewish products to Jewish people.
That's very good.
It's just that our 11 o'clock's with Mencken's department store, and I wish we had someone to make them feel comfortable.
You want me to run down to the deli, grab somebody?
That was the era when a guy would interview for a job and they'll ask a bunch of questions. They say, "Are you Jewish?" And they say, "Well, not necessarily."
I can see Marty, being affected by the concern that the NBA doesn't want to be, quote, too Jewish, from Jewish people.
I'm not sure if it would be being too Jewish. It could have also been being too New York.
He had made his reputation as a New York icon, and the networks were busy trying to expand and tended to go for more Midwestern types because that was supposed to be America.
So there was a frustration for Marty that he had never gotten that kind of national exposure or credit. And television gets you there. Radio does not. He was just 5 or 10 years too early in the game.
That meant that kids in Idaho and Missouri and Texas and Florida missed out on hearing the world's greatest basketball announcer.
Though no longer a national basketball broadcaster, Marty took joy in his growing family and found that his services were still in constant demand. In the 1950s and 60s, while simultaneously doing the radio play-by-play for the New York Knicks and the New York Football Giants, he also narrated the Paramount newsreels.
At Derby Downs in Akron, Ohio, the soapbox is king. In progress here, a Canadian national curling tournament. Girls will be girls, and they're one of the reasons for 1950s roller derby men.
Called the races from Yonkers.
Into the lower turn. Overkick on the outside now has taken the lead. That's Overkick on the outside in front. Meadow Skipper along the rail is a tight second. Off-road Dale is third.
And did the pre- and post-game shows for the Brooklyn Dodgers and New York Yankees with Gussie Moran. But it would be his association with a celebrated group of football players that endeared him to New York sports fans forever.
My first memory of him is on the field at Fairfield University. It was at the end of practice, and he's standing out in the middle of the field with a couple of our players.
Well, the next thing we see the three backs and Marty line up on a starting line. And there's somebody that waves him off for the race, and he beats my three guys.
This little round pudgy guy in his 40s beat our three fastest men on the ball club.
Asking my father, I said, who is that guy? That's Marty Glickman. That's our radio broadcaster.
When I arrived in New York, one of the great things about it was Marty Glickman. He was typical New York, and he was big time New York, and New York is big time. New York football changed the whole world of pro football, and he was a big part of that.
The early 1960s became a golden age not only for the NFL and Giants football, but for Marty Glickman, as he did the radio play-by-play for 3 consecutive championship games.
Giants go out in front 6-0.
But this time there would be no scandal or politics to derail his career, as fans were treated to that rare combination of a truly great broadcaster and a team of legendary athletes.
We had a lot of stars back then, guys like Frank Gifford, Charlie Connolly, Kyle Rowe.
Y.A. Tittle, Del Schaffner,
Roosevelt Brown. Even the defense were celebrities, Sam Huff, and Overstelly,
Modulesky, Jim Katcavage,
Rosie Greer. They were a elite group of individuals. Very intelligent team.
They did have a great defensive team, but don't say that they didn't have also a good offensive team. After all, I remember Y.A. Tittle when he was throwing passes to Del Schaffner.
Y.A. Tittle to Schaffner. Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
Tittle goes back to pass. Throws deep down to the left side to Schaffner. Way down.
everyone in the stands had the radio on. It just permeated the whole building. I mean, Yankee Stadium, you heard my father give the play-by-play of the game.
It was like he was just surround sound.
We wanted to listen to Marty. Here was this man sitting there describing the weather and the aura. And as I sit here, I'm getting the chills.
And Royer had taken his helmet off, and he was jumping up and down, stamping his feet like a little kid who had been refused some candy.
But it wasn't $25 words. It was $1 and $1.50 words. Everybody could understand Marty Glickman.
If you could chart the vocal inflections of his broadcast, there would be almost an orchestral quality to it. A little from over here, they'd get the string section in, now come the horns, and in the end, it had a texture to it that only a tiny handful of broadcasters could ever match.
Marty started broadcasting Giants games in 1948. Over the years, he worked with various colormen, including Ernie Harwell and Johnny Most.
Johnny Most reporting.
Then in 1961, Marty Glickman was teamed with a new partner, former Giants lineman Al DeRogatis, or as he was affectionately known to the fans,
Hero.
That was such an effective pairing.
You were sort of eavesdropping on the two of them, two buddies who were sitting watching the game together.
They were kids watching this game and telling the story to their friends in the schoolyard as they watched.
Marty had a simple technique. He wouldn't waste Al's time by setting him up with a question. He'd just say, Al DeRogatis?
The Giants lead the 49ers 41-14. Al DeRogatis?
Al had the knack of actually calling the plays before they took place.
Now, Williams' Marty played Del Sharpner very tight that time and was close to it. We might look for Hawaii to go to Del on the fly here. Let's see what it looks like. Sharpner's put out to the left side, Gibbons flank to the right side. Kittle call signals. He goes back to pass. Throws deep down the left side to Sharpner, way down. Sharpner's got it. He go up, and he keeps running. He's going to go all the way.
You're looking at what probably is the only coach that ever got tough negative letters and phone calls from fans because I didn't call the plays that the over-the-air guys, Glickman and Al DeRogatis, called when they were broadcasting the game.
The NFL's then TV blackout of Giants home games would only add to the magic of Marty's broadcasts.
And here's Marty Glickman with that thrilling style at the microphone, and at a time where television was not as prominent.
And that's how we saw the game on radio with Marty.
And it's not as if you're seeing highlights on ESPN Sports Center at night. This was the football experience for New Yorkers.
Gibbons flank wide out to the right side. Rest of the ball club is tight. Tittle takes the snap back, goes straight back to pass. Seeing rush, throws down the middle. It's caught by Gibbons at midfield. A beautiful one-handed catch at midfield, and he goes forward to the 47. What a catch by Gibbons. A one-hander reaching to his shoe top to pull that in. Talk about your big plays. Gibbons came up with a magnificent catch. At top speed, he reached down with one hand, his right hand. He pulled it off his ankle top, and he was hit immediately by Glenn Glass. Giants go to the line of scrimmage. Tittle ducks in on the center, takes the snap back, rolls out to his left to pass, looks downfield, throws over the middle, completes the Gibbons at the 30, down to the 25, out of bounds at the 21-yard line. And the Giants are on the move. Gibbons now goes down as a flank to the right side. The rest of the ball club is tight. Tittle, the quarterback. On the steal is 22. Tittle takes it. Goes back to pass, looking downfield, throws angry to the right side, completes to Morrison. Morrison going all the way. Touchdown! 1, 2, 3 passes. Touchdown, Giants!
I think my experience in 1936, my experience in athletics generally, specifically in 36, made me aware of the fact that I am not different than other people of the world, that we're all one.
In the falls and winters of New York in the 1950s and 60s, Marty Glickman was at the peak of his career, painting his word's eye pictures for the New York Knicks on Friday night, Yonkers Raceway Saturday night, and the New York Giants on Sunday. But when he heard that people were criticizing the youth of the day, Marty made time to spotlight the positive things students were doing, as he worked for the broadcast minimum, creating and then televising for 16 years the high school game of the week.
I did quite a number of years at the high school game of the week, and some of those games were just as memorable as doing the National Football League championship games.
I ended up as an associate producer for the telecast, and I was a senior in high school. And when Marty would show up, this was a major event throughout New York City. I mean, kids were so excited to be on television.
When we heard that Channel 11 and Marty Glickman and Vic Obeck were coming to Malvern High School to broadcast a Malvern Mules basketball game on TV, it was like, oh man, the Beatles are coming.
And here I was in Brooklyn, New York, a Jewish kid when going to a primarily Jewish school, and I used to watch Iona New Rochelle. I couldn't understand why I watched it, but I watched it and had a great time with it.
My senior year in '61, Marty Glickman, who I've idolized my whole younger life, is coming to do our game. There was a chance I was going to play. I was either 6th or 7th man, and if I get in, Marty Glickman was going to say my name. It was like, it was more important that Marty Glickman was doing the game than it was on TV. I mean, it was nice that it was going to be on TV, but I wanted him to say my name, but I never got in the game. That was traumatic.
I went with Tittle and a lot of the guys to the different high schools, and we did it because of Marty. And I was blown away by what he did. And he did it just because he was a good person.
A lot of nice things happened to me, and they happened because the coaches in the New York City school system cared about their kids, and they made it possible for guys like me and Hank Greenberg and Sid Luckman to get ahead. I wanted to be able to repay society for the good done me.
These broadcasts weren't just a celebration of the jocks. He would bring in at halftime the Glee Club, the Chess Club,
debating societies, choral societies, all the positive things that were happening in the schools.
And he also introduced the cheerleaders, which one year included my sister, and she was horribly embarrassed at the thought that she would be introduced as his daughter. So when he gave all the names of the cheerleaders, he introduced her as Betsy Glotz. Needless to say, she was more mortified by that.
The other thing that was, in retrospect, so remarkable was that Marty attempted to elevate high school sports. He had done something that really hadn't been done before, and I don't think has been done since.
He was involved in the high school sports. He was involved in the Police Athletic League. He was involved in a lot of things that worked with kids, with sports as a vehicle for other things, not sports for sports' sake.
He saw the potential to make a difference. And he cared about the city. He remembered his own life. He did an enormous amount to help the youth of the city.
What Marty did for these kids and these programs was unprecedented. And it all came from the heart.
People today say what a great broadcaster he was and how he was the one that got them to fall in love with the Giants.
At the end of the 1972 season, WNEW, the Giant station, hired a new management team. With Marty's contract up for renewal, they decided to play hardball and refused to talk to him about a new deal. Meanwhile, Marty's best friend and former Giants producer Nat Ash was now working for WOR, the New York Jet station.
They had offered me twice what I was getting from the Giants. I said, I don't want to leave the Giants. I've been with them all these years. I'm part of the family.
With the season fast approaching and WNEW still refusing to negotiate, Marty agreed to terms with the Jets The next day, WNEW rushed to offer him a new contract.
I said, I can't. I just shook hands with my friends over at WOR, and it's a firm deal. I don't know what happened. I still don't know what happened.
6 months later, WNEW fired its new management team.
Three-man rush, Stamos goes back to pass, setting up, looking downfield, throws deep, way downfield to Barkham. It's touchdown! 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 Barkham makes a great grab in the end zone. Touchdown by Barkham! What a grab!
It just never sounded right to hear him doing the Jet games. I mean, he was a Giants broadcaster.
He called me one day and said, there's a new cable system. It's called Home Box Office. And I had no idea what he was telling me. What is Home Box Office?
Hello there, everybody. I'm Marty Glickman. Hello there, everybody. I'm Marty Glickman. Hello there, everybody. I'm Marty Glickman for Home Box Office.
Marty was the first person on the air at HBO.
The moment I heard Marty's voice, I was certain HBO was going to emerge as a truly miraculous thing.
For Marty, it was kind of a jump start because here was a man who had been denied the airwaves on television in the 60s for being too New York, and finally he had found a home to become a network television broadcaster.
His trusty leisure suit of the day in tow, Marty would not only give HBO its voice, he would develop its content. HBO began in 1972, primarily as an all-sports network coming out of Madison Square Garden.
When Chuck Dolan and Jerry Levin decided that this was a network that needed to be started, well, who was the logical person to grab to help but Marty?
This is Marty Glickman bringing you basketball thrills from Madison Square Garden.
To jumpstart the new network, Marty would lock up the rights to 100 Garden events, including all Knicks and Rangers games. He would then call upon a lifetime of relationships to bring NFL, NBA, and Olympic programming to HBO.
Now he could pull in all his friends, Red Auerbach.
In case you've seen Red and me before, you'll know that we disagree on almost everything.
Ed Sable, all the people that he had cared for and loved for so many years.
Still, creating 24 hours a day of programming for a fledgling cable network had its challenges. This led to some less than Emmy-winning television.
Well, you all sit down and rest for a while here in the great Agricultural Hall at the Allentown Fairgrounds. We've got a little great entertainment for you. Hi, girl. How are you?
They're owned by Robert A. Coppell of New York. It's interesting, we've had two owners.
Evel Knievel's Snake River Canyon Jump will be seen on Home Box Office tomorrow night, starting at 6:30. And there he stands, all aflame, just standing up there, waiting, still waiting. Why doesn't he go? Here he comes now. Wow.
At one point in the early years, HBO was in danger of going out of business. But Marty Glickman's innovative programming ideas ensured its success.
He came up with the ideas to do all of the things that eventually became settled practice at HBO.
NBC was covering Wimbledon, and they were covering the finals. And Marty had this idea. He said, well, Wimbledon's a 2-week event. Monday through Friday, they're playing tennis. Shouldn't we become the broadcaster of the midweek Wimbledon championships? You have to understand something. That sounds like no big deal. In those days, it had never happened. No one had ever thought of taking early round golf or tennis coverage and broadcasting it. He lifted Wimbledon to a whole nother plateau as a tennis event. It was an incredible precedent. He changed the landscape of sports and television as we know it today.
Another American who in his own way battled racism and injustice was laid to rest here in Chicago today. Jesse Owens, who was one of this country's greatest Olympic heroes, died Monday of lung cancer at the age of 66.
Jesse was a role model for all of us, black or white, whatever color.
To my dying day, I'll never, ever forget Jesse's wonderful gesture, and he meant it, of volunteering not to run so that Sam and I could run.
Marty became a board member of the Jesse Owens Foundation, which organized the Jesse Owens Award for the outstanding amateur athlete in the world. In 1985, in preparation for a golden anniversary celebration of Jesse Owens' Olympic victories, Marty Glickman returned to Berlin.
For the first time since 1936, I visited the Olympic Stadium. And I walked down into the well of the stadium to that portion of the track I was to have run, the backstretch on the 400-meter relay. And I looked at the place where Hitler and Goering and Goebbels and Hecht and all the other Nazi hierarchy sat during the games, and suddenly a wave of anger engulfed me. I began to curse out loud, yelling at the individuals, now all dead, like Robinson and Cromwell and Brundage and all. I was actually dizzy, feeling such rage that I thought I was going to pass out. How those no good sons of bitches could have kept an 18-year-old kid from competing in those games so long ago. And it wasn't as though it was me who was the 18-year-old kid, but how could any grown person keep a kid from competing in the games when it was his ambition to do just that? I was amazed, I was shocked that I had maintained this pent-up anger and hatred for 49 years. I never realized that it was still within me, this bitterness at having been passed over for the relay. I've been asked every 4 years about the 36 games, and I do not at all hesitate to tell the story so that it won't ever happen again.
9 years later, Marty would make his final visit to the Olympic Stadium as a guest of the New York Giants.
Marty, can you let go after all these years? When you consider what happened to other Jews, what happened to me was nothing. What are your emotions now? Sadness, wonderment. Just a few minutes ago, I sat in Adolf Hitler's box. I was there. He was not.
We welcome you to Gillette Stadium in Foxborough, Massachusetts for Week 9 of Monday Night Football. And tonight,
before I do the Monday night radio broadcast for Westwood One, I listen to tapes of Marty Glickman.
A young man who was a ball boy for the New York Knicks, 14 years old, introduced himself to me. He says, I want to be a sports announcer. Can I ask you some questions? I said, sure, Marv. And it was Marv Allen. And I coached him, taught him.
It was as if I were going to school.
One of the problems with Marv was that he sounded just like me.
I was so influenced by him. I'd answer the phone as if I was Marty. I would talk like him. I'd walk like him. I broadcast like him.
So we worked on his developing his own style.
I did eventually change from being Marty's clone.
Beginning with Marv Albert, Marty would find yet another way to give back. By mentoring those who had followed him into the profession he had revolutionized.
He also had another rare quality. He wanted you to be better than he was. He reveled in your success.
And for a guy in his position to be one of the all-time greats, and again, the man who invented so much of it, for him to want to share that, to me, that's unheard of.
I never even thought twice about giving advice to any young person who might ask, or any broadcaster who might ask, how to become a broadcaster. I just did it. And as far as finding time is concerned, there's always time for that.
After decades of mentoring a who's who of sportscasters, in 1983, NBC hired Marty to be the first ever network announcers coach.
I learned more in the almost 3 hours he gave me that day than I had in the previous, at that point, 15 years of my career.
Marty taught me how to broadcast. He really did. He was a great teacher. More than anything else that Marty Glickman ever did for me as a broadcaster was to teach me to speak English. I don't use cliches, and the reason I don't is because of Marty.
The main thing he did to me was extend some friendship to me, gave me some confidence.
When I went to work with NBC, he took me under his wing, so to speak, and helped me establish some confidence and understanding in what I was doing. He helped me grow a great deal, I believe.
5 years later, Marty tackled his biggest coaching challenge as he helped his next student make broadcast history.
Mike Weissman wanted NBC to be the first network to use a woman broadcaster on play-by-play of a football game.
I've never done play-by-play for football, so it was going to be a challenge for both of us. And frankly, I don't think he was in love with the idea at the beginning. I would say in the meeting, though, it was clear to him that I knew what I was talking about, and it was clear to me that he wasn't a real tough guy, that he was someone who really wanted me to succeed, and was very loving, very nurturing, and said to me, you know, you're not going to fail because I'm not going to let you.
He may be on the way. Yes, he is. Touchdown, Kansas City.
In the end, he was a great teacher. And I hear Marty Glickman when I listen to Marv Albert, Mike Breen.
Vince Barilla has it in the corner, moves out along the sideline, over to Al McGuire at the top of the key.
Back to Frazier, at center court, flips it ahead now to Russell. Cassie outside to DeBuscher, in the corner to Barnett.
Picks up his dribble, up top to Ewing. Ewing fires up a three, banks it in! Ewing banks it a three!
Marty had retired and hadn't really thought about working again, but he was such a legend and people revered him so much that he was asked to call Jet games all over again.
I remember being so happy when I heard the news that he was coming back to do the play-by-play for the Jets, to be able to listen to him do a game and really learn from him again on the air.
O'Brien looking right and left. A pass into the left corner. Touchdown! 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 Al Toon has a touchdown!
Marty Glickman is as good as ever. His voice still has the toughness of sidewalks, the speed of Spaldings, and the richness of egg creams.
Back the pass, Kelly throws short of it. Intercepted! New York ball over the right side. Down to the end zone. Touchdown, New York!
Marty Glickman would entertain Jets fans for 4 more years, reaching a personal milestone along the way.
One of the great broadcasters of all time, Marty Glickman, was honored for broadcasting his 1,000th football game. And a Jets.
But as the 1992 season approached, Marty was aware he was slowing down. The rare slip-up started to become a little less rare.
He was the first to talk about having trouble seeing certain parts of the field.
The press box is 150 feet above the level of the field itself. We're so far high up, we can't see very much more than the tops of the helmets.
And it's very difficult to do games there.
On the first play from scrimmage, Sean Smith comes in and makes the tackle on, I wasn't even looking to see who was carrying the ball that time.
For those of us that grew up with him in the 60s and the 70s, we didn't care if he slipped up a name. It was Marty Glickman again. We were all able to hear Marty Glickman again.
And one of the few things that fans of a certain generation have to hang on to is the familiar voice that they've listened to since they were a kid. And as that familiar voice gets into his 70s or sometimes even his 80s, as long as he still sounds more or less as he once did, fans are very forgiving about being a little bit slower on the uptake than they used to be. But the announcer himself, especially if it's Marty, remembers what the standard was and doesn't like it if he can't meet that standard.
In his 56th year in broadcasting, after having been inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame, the New York Sports Hall of Fame, the Jewish Sports Hall of Fame, the Sportscasters Hall of Fame, after having broadcast over 200 track meets, 1,000 football games, 3,000 basketball games, 15,000 horse races, 10 years of the Paramount newsreels, 13 years of today's baseball, 16 years of the high school game of the week, and 4 marble tournaments, Marty announced that the 1992 season would be his last. When news of his retirement spread, fans showered their New York treasure with an outpouring of love.
I've realized for the first time that there are Marty Glickman fans.
Yeah.
And which surprised me. I never thought in those terms. I thought in terms of the Jets fans, the Giants fans, the Knicks fans. But I now know, based on the letters I've received, that there have been Glickman fans as well. So I'm very pleased about that.
On December 26, 1992, Marty announced his final New York Jets game.
That does it, friends. Broadcasting American sports for 50 years has been a joy. And my heart goes out to Dennis Bird and Darryl Stingley and Mike Utley. Just keep swinging. I'm Marty Glickman.
As we look back at 1936, we feel at the United States Olympic Committee that an apology is long overdue.
In 1998, USOC President William Hibble presented Marty Glickman and posthumously Sam Stoller with its first ever Douglas MacArthur Award. 62 years after Marty's Olympic dreams had been crushed by racism and prejudice, the boy who had wanted to become Frank Merriwell was now the man being honored as not only an Olympian and a great athlete, but as someone who had served his country and spent a lifetime helping others.
And we thank you very much, Marty Glickman.
You had to stand back just in admiration. This was an admirable man in the way he lived his life right until the end.
Marty was a second father to me. I mean, he treated me in a way that, I mean, I'll never forget.
He was one of the most special people I ever had the opportunity to get to know.
I think he represented our hearts. I really do.
I wish I could hear that voice again. Marty Glickman was a mensch.
A mensch?
Mensch. A mensch.
I just remember sitting with my wife with him in a booth at a restaurant and knowing this would probably be one of the last times that we'd be together. And thinking to myself, what a wonderful relationship this has been. And how proud that, I had been able to cross paths with this giant.
This is Marty Glickman, he was a classic.
It's nice that we're catching up to him.
I'll tell you one story. Sports announcers are long-winded anyhow, so just one story more. After the games, I ran in Paris, and there were two Japanese sprinters, Yoshioka and Suzuki. And as I dug my starting hole, I noted that in lane number 1 was Suzuki, and we smiled at each other. I liked him. He liked me. I know it. I could tell by the look in his eye. I won the race. Wyckoff was second. Suzuki was third. And as we jogged back to the starting line to pick up our warm-up clothes, I felt a tap on my shoulder, turned, and there was Suzuki extending his hand, those wonderful brown, soft eyes, smiling at me. He congratulated me. I didn't speak Japanese, he didn't speak English. But that's all there was. But there was an empathy between us. I mentioned earlier I was a Marine during World War II. You know how Marines felt about the Japanese, particularly the Marines. Early in 1942, I read where in the landings on Luzon, a Japanese lieutenant, a former Olympic sprinter, was killed in those landings. And I, a Marine, cried. Now, can you imagine the feeling we had for each other? We'd known each other 2 minutes, 3 minutes. He was a Japanese soldat.
I was an American Marine, and I cried for her. That's what athletics can do. That's what sports can do. And it doesn't have to be the Olympic Games. It can be the schoolyards. It can be the New York Knicks. That's what sports truly is all about. The camaraderie, the love we feel for each other.
Rainstorms, windstorms, snowstorms. As of right now, there isn't a severe wind in the air. There's no rain, though it did sprinkle earlier. The forecast, however, is for showers and the possibility of thunder showers later in the afternoon. If it stays like this, it'll be most unusual. Usually it's unusual in Buffalo.
Hello again, everyone. This is Marty Glickman at the Matchbox Cyclone 5000. Veteran driver John Sullivan has been leading most of this contest. But he's being pressed by the challenger young Dougie Mayo. The youngster shifts. I don't believe my eyes. He's passed John and taken the lead. John shifts. And he misses the shift. It looks like an easy win for Dougie. And there you have it, fans. The thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. So we'll be looking for you, not next week, but certainly next season. Until then, I'm Marty Glickman saying so long.